Are you ready to go live? But I know that they told me that the legend.
Can you just raise the camera a little bit so that the chair sees? Yes.
So you guys ready? So I'd like to call the 267th meeting of the Equal Employment Practices Commission to order. First order of business, if our Executive Director Jean Victor could please call the roll.
Vice Chair and Commissioner Bonita,
Present.
Vice Chair and Commissioner Reeves,
Present.
Commissioner Alcantara, Commissioner Yearwood, Commissioner O'Connell.
Present.
We have quorum. Next order of business is the approval of the minutes of June 1st, 2023. You all had an opportunity to review them. We have a motion to approve. Commissioner Reese, approved. Commissioner O'Connell, seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Any nays? Having none, motion passes. The next order of business is the approval of the audit resolution, the 2023 final determination resolutions. And for this, I turn to Jennifer Shaw.
So we have 6 final determination resolutions for you to go on today. Each of these agencies has finished their audit portion of the audit, and now they're going to compliance monitoring. We have Department of Design and Construction, Tax and Z Commission, Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, Conflicts of Interest Board, NYC Economic Development Corporation, and the Department of Community Development. After the approval of the final determination resolutions, there is one compliance resolution, and you'll see that is also the Conflicts of Interest Board. They've had their final determination issued with no corrective actions needed. So they went straight into compliance monitoring and then were exempt from compliance monitoring. So that is why you see them twice, one for their issuance of their final determination resolution, and now again for their issuance of compliance, because they will be the first or second, I think the first of the 2020 that change to compliance.
So this first, so what's up for approval now is a determination of fines or with certain corrective actions.
No, so the first resolution, which is number 4 under 3A, was for the issuance of their final determination, which has 0 corrective actions. And then they responded to our final determination, which is required by the charter, just acknowledging that they disputed. And then we issued them their compliance resolution, which is B1.
And then for B1, that's where we sign the certificate.
Yes.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve as a bundle. Okay, I have a comment.
I have a comment. If you look at the resolutions here, what's striking is the EEPC has 16 corrective actions, which is higher than any other groups in this group. It's fact that they don't have an EOC officer and have not had one for a period, which would mean that clearly it's not something that happened yesterday, so no one would respond, and it happened for a while. That's quite troubling to me and leads to their not being able to provide us with the information that we request. And I'm not quite sure what that means in total, given the current U.S. Supreme Court ruling on affirmative action itself, whether that's going to mean any sense of lessening within the city of we following the EOC, or whether they continue to do that. I don't know whether it's the beginning of the pattern, the end of the pattern, or whether this is an anomaly. So I wish for the record to say that the fact that the response is I don't have the officer doesn't mean you don't have the data. I don't have an officer doesn't mean that someone else in the commissioner's office can't find the responses. You either did or did not issue a report telling your employees what they're supposed to do. And that's not the EOC officer that issues that report. That's the commissioner that's supposed to be signing it and telling his employees what her employees what they're supposed to do. So I find the non-response to it troubling, and I just wanted to point it out for the record that I'm concerned that this is the beginning of something, but this is just an.
If I can, may I just mention the so it did not really provide a lot of information for the PIQs, which is the information data information. It did respond to the preliminary determination. However, I just received an email yesterday from the analyst that's working on this audit that they have a new chief people officer. So I'm hopeful that perhaps that person will now kind of step up and take over and work with us to get their written compliance. But-
Thank you for that.
Commissioner O'Carroll, is recusing themselves for the discussion about economic development corporation, economic development corporation board. So I can't vote.
So, when we vote as a bundle for you, it will be excluding, resolution 4.
Right.
So that the record state that.
Resolution 5,
Resolution.
5.
A5.
We can vote it, we can vote,
We could do it individually.
we could do it with everything and then just vote on 5 separately. So I move that we vote on, that we approve the final determination resolutions for resolution 2023-267-850, 2023-267-156, 2023-267-866, 2022 267-312, 2023-267-261.
So we have a motion, we have a second. Second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. Abstentions, hearing none, the motion passes. Resolution.
I move that we approve resolution 2023-267-998.
I second that motion. We have one recusal. And, all in favor?
Aye.
To approve, say aye. Aye. All opposed, abstentions, hearing none, the motion passes. And then one recusal.
Now, for compliance resolution 2023-267-312, conflict of interest board, I move to have it approved C35.
Second,
All in favor?
opposed. Abstentions, hearing none, motion passes. Next order of business is old business, training of community board members. That would be Executive Director Chief.
Thank you. Just to kind of keep everybody in the loop on where we are with the training of community board members. If you remember, we had a meeting with the Queens Borough President's Office, and we've also had a meeting with Brooklyn Borough President's Office. Brooklyn Borough President's Office representatives then met on our Employment Advisory Committee. And I thought it was a very fruitful meeting, particularly for them because although Commissioner Pinnock was not in attendance at the Employment Advisory Committee that was just recently held, her representative was there, the Chief of Staff, Patrice Williams. And Patrice explained that the community board members could utilize DCAS to get the temporary IDs and passwords in order to get the training and to access the training through their website. So with the sexual harassment training, that should not be an issue at all because the sexual harassment training is, in the cloud. But the other trainings, they would have to access them through the DCAS system. So I think that's probably the way that.
We also
Well, who
discussed,
will monitor that they have indeed received the training?
So, well, it'll get monitored in two ways. The community boards are gonna have to monitor themselves, so they are the officers of the community boards, like the district manager, et cetera, will have to monitor the training for each of the community boards that they oversee. In the meantime, they will get a certificate from DCAS when they complete the training, and when we audit them, we'll check to make sure that or done their training.
So you're gonna audit the office of the community board manager, just make sure that all the community board members have been trained.
That will be part of it.
Okay, so what if they haven't?
Then they have to go back and get them trained.
This is all to be worked out. The best solution is a citywide remedy through legislative submission, which the chief of staff, Asher Freeman, for the Brooklyn Board President's office, agreed that they need to partner with us to identify council. Well, we need to get the legislative language with their general counsel to submit it. Because while we can make progress maybe in Brooklyn, maybe elsewhere, this is really should be a citywide. Let's say it's citywide. So.
But I'm asking a different question.
That's where we're at.
I'm asking a different question. You're focusing on mandating their undertaking. And I'm looking at what if Community Board 7, my lovely community board, we have 3 or 4 progressive members who don't want to do it because they just don't want to
No,
be.
but that's what I'm saying.
But
That's what I'm saying. It has to be a legislative citywide remedy. Because they should and wouldn't be, and maybe rightfully could say, why are you holding me to a standard that you're not holding fellow community board member in Queens to? How dare you? And I don't have to be. Where's the language for this? And where's the mandate? And where's the stick? Where's the regulatory framework to hold me accountable? And we have none of that, is what I'm saying. So I'm saying a legislative remedy that has the whole city, all 59 community boards, all 2,950 people who do business on behalf of the city. Advisory capacity is the way to really go about this. Although we appreciate Brooklyn's commitment, and to us, Queens' commitment to partner with the EEPC to kind of get this going. It's not going to get going until we really have it to stay remedy.
Or let your language in your legislation that community board member is facing dismissal for non-compliance. In other words, you're not saying they're mandating dismissal, but they're facing dismissal for non-compliance.
So it sounds like, we're like piloting this, right? We're testing, we want to do this, and some are going along with it. So we're testing to see if the system will work until we get a legislative remedy. I think that.
Absolutely. And I guess in this process, we find out, is the district manager the appropriate one to keep the records of who took the training or not? Or is there a more centralized way through DCAS or something where we can pull the data to some auditor? So all of those kind of questions.
The district manager is no different than you're asking each individual agency to give you information when you audit them. And the district, essentially, you're auditing, I'm intended to use, you're auditing Community Board 7, rather than centralize it. Community Board 7 is going to know what each community board has about 50 members. So Community Board 7 would know who those 50 are, when they've been appointed, because that's the information he or she would have. And they would also know whether or not they've applied. You really want to get below a centralization. You want to be at the bottom knowing.
We'll see, maybe not, right? The same way we don't like for folks to push them from their mandates or things that don't make sense to us. Maybe district managers will be appalled at that suggestion, that on top of everything else they have to
They
do.
get paid.
They have to deal with. Every time there's FOIL requests, they're also the chief procurement person, they're also essentially the HR person. So they've, over the years and decades, have had a lot of things thrown at them. And there just may be a different way to do this that may make more sense with the input of the people most proximate to the issues that we're trying to address. We're not necessarily as proximate as those who have to daily basis interact with their own community. So that's what I'm saying. May very well play out the way you said. We may hear from the borough presidents a different perspective. We may hear from district managers a different perspective. The fact that we're getting all over the fact that I got such a sizable income to the city, people who work on behalf of the city, I think it's really what we're eyeing, if you want, goals we're trying to Thank you for that. Next, we have the EEPC bylaws. That's Jennifer Thal.
Yes, so we've been circulating the bylaws, amongst the commission members. We've had some discussion at the last meeting, which I incorporated into, this draft. Did not receive any feedback, so I'm assuming that the language is okay, but if not, we can discuss and I can circulate another final version, for the board's approval.
I think this is maybe our third review of this, and not hearing feedback, I think is a reasonable assumption to assume that we are okay. I think this is an area where, again, the EPC has made a lot of progress in the last 2 years, considering we started with no document and now we have one. It's called to any organization, mission and vision. And I'm prepared to vote on this today, but I do understand others feel differently. I would like to postpone it, but I think that, well, in that case, I'd like to hear from Commissioner.
I think we should postpone it until we're all in one. I know we have two list of commissioners, and I think we should wait until we're all together. I don't think there's any hurry to do it, and I mean, we are a majority of the five, but not.
Commissioner Carver, you feel way?
I am going to send a message to Commissioner Yearwood and Ms. Kerr. But what we talked about this at the last meeting, we didn't have any changes at the last meeting, or these are the changes from the last meeting.
These are the changes.
And nobody has given any feedback since
That's
the
fine.
email.
No, but Commissioner Wood, I think it's on vacation. I'm happy to postpone this vote so that we don't have to. Yeah. So, okay.
I think we should.
Because I think Commissioner,
I think it should be.
I think Commissioner Alcantara has something in her family is preventing her from being here today as well. So that's the reason. Our next meeting is what, September?
14th, I believe.
All right, so postponement to September 14th. So now 5 commissioners.
In the meantime, I will recirculate this with the red line, just in case there's any other further comment, and then it can be finalized before the next meeting. If there's any further revisions, I'll incorporate it.
When you send that one, can you just do a color or something, draw our attention to the things that we there's the things that are mandated by charters and things that are mandated by us. So just the language that we were really grappling.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I put it in the track changes, but I'm happy to like highlight.
Well, the track changes are.
Yeah, when I,
Okay.
yeah, in the red track changes is what I had
That's the
changed.
language.
But again, if you'd like me to highlight or add a different to make it even more stand out, because I know it is a 5-page document.
I know the track changes were the latest track changes, but there's some of this language that shifted from the first document to the second that now became permanent language, not necessarily identifiable from your last track change.
Okay, so,
I think.
So the history of all of.
Why don't you go all the change?
okay, we'll do that.
Next order of business, we have procedures for remote attendance with the agency council.
Yes, so last meeting, the board voted on a resolution to permit remote attendance under extraordinary circumstances in accordance with the changes to the open meetings law. As part of that resolution, there was the determination that there would be procedures that would be created and followed by the board. I circulated those procedures. I received some feedback, but no final decisions were made. So when I included the documents for you, all of the feedback that I received, I put in by commissioner in each of the areas that there was some question. I don't know if you would like to discuss it or if you want to move it and get back to me. But there was really kind of 3 points that were of question in terms of what would be defined as an extraordinary circumstance and who is going to be notified if you need to participate remotely. And whether or not the circumstance would be noted in the minutes of the meeting. Those are the 3 points that were kind of up.
So what you have in yellow,
That's my suggestion based upon extraordinary.
Extraordinary includes disability, caregiving responsibility, or any other significant or unexpected factor or event that precludes the commissioner's physical attendance at such meeting. And so,
That is the language from the open meetings law. That's what they included as what extraordinary circumstances could be.
to the extent that significant is Commissioner Alcantara's board meetings in her job of state, that would be, I would think, a significant event that would preclude her attendance,
Or physical.
her physical.
That's to the board to decide. That's really
Time.
and or ahead of time now to decide and include in there if we want to make that a specific provision in the procedures.
Well, I think that from my perspective, it should be a specific piece because we know that that is part of her problem she has from time to time. Conflict, which is her mandated attendance at a board meeting and physically 90 miles away from me. I think I'm not overstating the distance.
Well, I think it's less about the distance. I think it's more about the precedent. So these procedures are not for a moment in time, right? So we're moving from the COVID procedures back to some permanent procedures. And so I think that as we're looking at this, we're not thinking about one person's circumstances, but what are we saying going forward for this board? What are our expectations?
I
I can define it if one's full-time employment has mandated meetings that conflict with their appearance here in order to permit them to appear by Zoom.
But that's not extraordinary, that's ordinary,
But
right? If we're saying, to me, like if we know Elaine, the first Friday of every month is going to be in Florida, that's an ordinary thing, right? Like if we can say, look at the calendar
and therefore make a meeting around it.
or something else, but right, but whatever it is, it doesn't sound to me to be extraordinary.
So I think, for similar reasons why we're not voting on the EPC bylaws today, may apply to why it makes sense to postpone this until September.
Do you,
We have to.
excuse me, I'm sorry, would the board like me to recirculate this document again for
I think
additional
what I'd
feedback?
like you to do is to highlight and circulate two, because that's really what our issue is. How do we? Cosie's right, we need to think about it beyond an individual's problem. But the issue is we currently have an individual problem, and how do we deal with it?
Yeah, but I don't think I think the language here deals with extraordinary circumstances. And it's so they provide a little bit more guidance to
If
it.
Rosie is pointing out that it's not extraordinary if you know we have a fixed meeting schedule.
Yeah, which is why we not dealing with that situation. Yeah. Speak to that situation, speak to that one individual. It may mean if an individual every morning from 10:15 to 12 has some kind of commitment, and they can't really be a commissioner. So you can't deal with it, but it's good. It's a position.
That may be a problem.
So, all right, so we'll
Table it.
table it. Next, we have section 5, new business, the budget for fiscal year 24.
Right, we spent a lot of time over the, excuse me, fiscal year talking about our budget. And making, requests and entreaties for additional funding, and I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. We do not get any additional funding. Same budget that we had.
Let's head count it.
So, yeah, we lost a head count last year and last fiscal year. So yes, we have less headcount,
So the same budget that we had last year, which was a budget that was.
which was a budget that we, yes, we could, because we lost headcount.
And we're using headcounts now again.
Yeah, we do, and, so we have two kinds of budget, you know, the two parts of the budget, we, the headcount part, and which is salaries, and then we have other than personal services, other than personal services, dollars are the same.
But your head count is lower.
Our headcount is one low. But
So essentially, your budget's been reduced.
yes,
So your
So,
budget
yeah.
coming into 23 is less than it was coming into 22.
yes,
We've lost in the last 2 years, for example, we've lost 2 head position account.
that is correct.
But the budget is flat, but it does include, COLAs for staff.
Yes,
Okay.
because that's contractual.
I have a different question, which I would like an answer to for the next meeting. Before we had mandates to do research. So go back to the charter. Well, we don't request to do charter, we basically doing audits. And then we have every 2 or 3 years have a conference. But there was very little being done in terms of the entire research unit. The research unit gets added to the budget. I mean, you gotta go back and look historically, but I think I'm right. The research unit gets added to the budget, and then the research director is added with an assistant. So there are 2 people in the research unit at some point in time. And at some point in time, there is HR that is added as well. So those are 3 heads that did not appear in the budget. I think it's probably 6 years ago, maybe 5 years. You think I took that time. If the audit numbers, Jennifer, you probably have some sense of this, but if the audit numbers, the number of auditors was larger at some point in time.
Just last year, yes. Just last year, we had 2 managers and 4 analysts, and now we're down to 1 manager and 3 analysts. And one of those analysts is brand new.
So if your audit group has been reduced, and your research group is static, how are you supposed to do what you've been mandated to do?
Something has to give.
But I think probably putting together sort of a history where you were and what the impact are, may be the case you have to make up to the city council that is not understood. So it's not, OMB can tell us to cut heads, that's fine. But are you telling us that cutting productivity is okay? Because if that's true, then we would like to be let off, we would like to be eased of our mandate of being either what local law 13 requires us to do, or being eased from the mandate that the charter itself requires us to do. So, I need a history. I'm doing this from recollections in my head, and my head could be wrong. After all, I'm a agent.
We can do the history in terms of any strategy and implement the history, that's understandable. If there's implications and consequences as to the removal of specific other duties in the EEPC. In terms of, because, certain political climates and certain things, people will be more than happy to do these things that are required. So, sure.
We're not, I don't think we're asking for it to be, we're not asking to be removed from our requirements, but we're really, the flip side of the point is, we can't meet them.
So I think the point I'm just asking for is you guys to come back so they communicate this strategy. The next, oh, have you finished with the budget?
Commissioner, welcome.
Thank you. How are you?
We're joined by Commissioner Cantata.
I love your hair.
Oh, thank you. Me too.
Next order of business, we have New York City open data. No, pardon me, policy guidelines for commissioner payment. That would be,
That would be me, and don't see it in the packet. Did you guys have it?
I don't see it's important.
I thought I read it. Yeah,
I didn't read that. This requires a vote. Is this for a vote today?
it was a follow-up from a conversation that we had at the last meeting, when we talked about what we needed. That's what she's being.
But what's the action requirement? Jennifer? Is that
Don't understand.
At a minimum discussion.
discussion? Are we, I don't have it in front of me and reading it, so. Commissioner,
I printed it out, so I'll give it to you, but I have a question. And it really has to do with, I appreciate that you have piloted this group of committees that keep you from the silos, so that you put it together and try to break down the silos. And I appreciate that a commissioner can attend if the commissioner wants to, but I don't think you should pay for it. I think that, because I believe, for want of a better term, that's not really a mandated activity. The mandated activities are testifying. And the mandated activities are appearing at these meetings. And to the extent that you have now 5 of us, as opposed to only having 3 of us, it does cost more money and you have problems with money. So where I'm coming from, that is a selective, that is an added committee group that you put together, but not, the commissioner's attendance is not necessary for that work. Essentially, it's a working group.
It is a work.
And a commissioner's attendance is nice, but not a necessary piece. A commissioner is needed when you're testifying in front of the council on budget. A commissioner is needed when you're testifying on legislation, because you need the appearance of our involvement. But I do not believe a commissioner is needed in a group. So that's where I come out on it, and that may save you money.
Are we, Commissioner O'Connell?
I've only had a chance to read it just now, so I don't feel like I have anything intelligent.
Yeah, this is another issue that could take to September. I disagree with Commissioner Reese in terms of the use and time and expertise of commissioners, and also not legislating or not creating language for what's here, but what's to come, and the future growth and role, the importance of the EEPC, and decisions that the commission vote on in terms of what's important. Meetings, otherwise time. The commission ought to be compensated for the time. So I guess this is something that we can discuss when we vote on this. Have the discussion. Next order of business, we have New York City open data.
That is me. So, New York City data is a local law from 2012 that requires all public data to be freely available on a single web portal to the public. A public data set is any comprehensive collection of data that is maintained on a computer system by or on behalf of a city agency. So as part of our participation in open data, we are making sure that the public knows that our all of our data sets, which currently consist of our annual reports, local law 13 reports, audit reports, and our schedule of meetings, are open, available on the open data website. The purpose of this is so that people from the public can go look, search, find data without having to do individual FOIL requests. And we are committed to it to increase transparency, accountability, and accessibility within city government. We have a data coordinator, which is Imani, and she is working to identify and upload the data sets to the open data website.
Yes, and this is as, the kind of data that we have is, in terms of the format, that PDF in nature.
Yes,
So it would be essentially, the same transparency and the same accessibility that appears on our current website in terms of our documents. That same experience will just be transferred over to the open data pool
yes.
so that it's compliant with the local law. 2012.
I believe so, and I think it's also going to be compiled in a way that is like searchable, almost like an Excel spreadsheet.
And machine readable.
Yes.
Machine readable.
As part of the open data participation, every agency is required to do civic engagement to basically let the public know that they participate with open data and that information about the agency is available through open data. Since we really don't have a lot of public participation, one way that we engage with the public and do that civic engagement commitment is through this discussion today. So.
Commissioners.
Question. So today's resolution 2023 AP/267-998 New York City Economic Development. It would not be part of that data because this is not a final piece of anything and would only be included ultimately because it would be part of our annual report.
No, yes and no. It would not be included as a standalone document in the portal because the EEPC has taken the practice that we don't basically release standalone, final and preliminary determinations because it doesn't give a full picture of the audit. So once the audit is complete and they receive their determination of compliance, partial compliance, and hopefully not non-compliance, that audit document as one PDF will then be available on open
But
data.
that's the final, but not the working, so.
No, that will, the resolution and the final determination itself are part of that audit document that is then provided to the
All
public.
the work papers.
Yes,
Are then part of the final document.
yes, part of.
I'm just trying to understand what goes, but.
So what we put on our website, so if you were to go to our website under previous audits and you click on an agency and you open up their most recent audit, what you would find was, I believe, the initiation letter, the preliminary determination, the final determination without, the preliminary determination, the agency's response without their documents because that's confidential information. The final determination, the final determination resolution, the agency's response to the final determination without their documents, and the resolution of compliance as well as the certificate.
Okay.
So all of those documents, if you click on the audit from say 2012, that all of those documents for that particular audit will come up in one packet so that the reader can get a full picture of where they started and how they ended.
But the working communications between,
They are not made available until the audit is complete. They're not put up on open data or our website until it's done.
but the working the dialogue.
That's not the
between the-
email.
Never goes on.
No.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand what is there given, what is made public to the public.
What's made public to the public are our produced, I guess they would consider these reports. The internal working is not privy to, it wouldn't be privy under a FOIL. If it's not available under a FOIL, it wouldn't be available under open data.
Pretty much everything is already on our website.
Yes, everything, all of these things are on our website already. We're just participating in the global central portal.
Mhm.
Right now, the data sets are not uploaded. I believe they're scheduled to be uploaded by open data on October 31st of this year.
Halloween.
Next,
Trick or treat.
thank you for that update. Next order of business is order update. That's me as well.
That is me as well. Good question.
Thank you.
So quick update. In terms of the 2023 audits, you have been voting on final and compliance resolutions. As of now, there's a total of 25 big agency audits, that's what we call them. A third of them are in compliance monitoring. About I would say a third of them, a little bit less than a third, a little bit less than 2/3 of them have their preliminary determination, at least in a draft form, that's being now circulated for review amongst manager and legal. We only have 5 preliminary determination letters that have not been fully drafted yet, and one of them is the Office of the Mayor, whose audit just started. We released their picks 2 weeks ago. We had an information session with them, and once the pick responses are in, which I believe is next week, then the analysts will start working on the preliminary determination for that particular audit. So those are the big audits, and then we actually also have 18 community boards. The Brooklyn community boards are being audited. We sent out initiation letters last week. We are scheduled to have 2 information sessions with the district managers and chairs for next week. We will be releasing the preliminary interview questionnaire to them the following Monday. They'll have 2 weeks to respond, and then the analysts will receive the information and begin drafting. We are hoping that if we get all of the preliminaries and the finals done by October 31st, we will be having 18 compliance resolutions for the agency to vote on. What is good about this particular round of community board audits is prior to our initiation letter being sent, I had a conference call with the Brooklyn Borough President's current veto officer. She was very supportive of our work, and she indicated that she would do anything she could in terms of like providing documents, policy statements, training records to the community boards. And I believe she might have even sent out an email prior to our initiation letter to them indicating the EPC's coming, don't panic, we're gonna get through this together. We had put together an information sheet that basically tells community boards what they should be doing annually or biannually or ongoing in terms of to be compliant with our audits, and I believe she included that in her correspondence. So I am very hopeful that we are going to get a good response from them when the preliminary interview questions are sent out, and that these audits can be wrapped up in a less painful way than others have in the past, unfortunately. We have the full support of the Brooklyn Borough President's Office. Their EE officer is very much ready to assist in any way she can. So I felt like that was important to know regarding these.
So what do you think your total number will be for the year?
We're still aiming for 71. We're up to 35 and it's only July. So we might be short by maybe 5 or so, if that. But I have to say, and I say it at every meeting and I will continue to say it, our audit unit is very hardworking. They are very much determined to make our numbers, to meet our goals, to get everything in compliance, to work with agencies, to wrap them up, early in compliance versus later in compliance. So the EEPC has a very strong audit unit and they're going to do everything they can to get us to 70.
Thank you.
Like the proactiveness of your company. President's office to say, don't panic, we'll get through this together.
Yes, well, her and I had a very lovely conversation, and I explained to her what our expectations are of community boards and their relationship with the borough president's EO officer. She did not participate in our audit as an EO officer, she just recently became appointed. So she did want to reach out to her board members and said, if you need training records, reach out to me. They're going to be asking you for this thing. So she sent out our information sheet. So I'm hoping that with that collaboration with her, that the community board audits may be less, like I said, may go a little bit smoother than other audits because, the community boards, they're small. As you mentioned earlier, they have a lot of responsibilities at the district manager level and who is the person that we work with directly. And sometimes they feel a little overwhelmed when they hear audit without necessarily realizing what we are actually asking of them, which is not a tremendous amount because we recognize the size of their and scope of their EPO program. So I'm hopeful. I'm very, very hopeful.
Commissioner Reese?
I think I'm somewhat out of order, but I would like to thank Jennifer for all of her hard work on our behalf. since, in fact, this is gonna be the last meeting, and before we went on to other things, I just want to thank you for all of your diligence in meeting our numbers, continuing the last 5 years.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Here. Echo.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Next, order of business will be, the research update, employment advisory committee.
So we already talked about the training of the community board members, which was the major focus of the meeting, so I won't add anything to that since that's already been discussed. And then we also had what I thought was an interesting discussion on proposed changes to the US Census and how they are going to manage race and ethnicity data that I thought was helpful. And yeah, and the next one is scheduled for the middle of September.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
Next, we have, still with you, the
Yep.
local law 13 reports.
So Vice Chair Reese indicated she wanted to have a discussion about the recommendations that were made in the report published last year, and whether or not any progress had been made on them. So just for a brief summary, so this is not the report that was published this past March or April. This is the one from last year, published in 2022. So basically 4 recommendations were made. 2 had to do with the availability estimates and seeds, one of them being that they haven't been updated in 10 years, 9 at the time the report was published. And secondly, to propose that each agency develop a unique composite of what their availability is. So those were 2 of the recommendations. A third had to do with a more intensive and expanded effort to provide training to personnel in the lower paying job titles. And then the 4th had to do with a general review of the civil service system, particularly the competitive civil service system and the exams, who's taking the exams, who's prepared for the exams, and whether or not those exams actually measure what is needed for somebody to perform well in the role. To my knowledge, to be frank, if any changes have been made based on that report, I'm not aware of them, and I don't think any EEPC is.
Well, the reason for raising it is because the aging of the seeds data is nothing new. The EEPC has been in this, I've been on the commission for 11 years. We have been aware of this for 11 years. And it is a real problem because if you pass local law 13 and expect that our report is going to show you any underutilization, it's as good as the underlying data. Ergo, it is of no value. That is troubling. I'm not sure it's understood by the council. Perhaps it is, but I'm not sure that it really is understood as to what the ramifications are. And I guess I have a couple of shooting from the hip thoughts. One is that we as a board reiterate what our recommendations are and send them to both the mayor's office and the city council chair's office, indicating that to really be, for want of another word, to really, not only for us to perform, but for the city to be an equal employment, an equal employer, something has to be done. And something, I'm sure DCAS will tell you, the reason the seeds data is so old is because they don't have anybody employed to be able to update it. I could answer that. It's an answer I've been hearing for a long time. It's probably true, but that doesn't make it right. And the failure to understand its implications, I think, is very troubling. I don't know who in the mayor's office would be the right person. I don't think you send it to the mayor. I think you send it to someone on his staff who really does have a title that would indicate that that person should care. And I do think we send it to certainly our city council member who's chair of the committee, but she does care. And I suspect the city council council chair cares about it as well. So it would be a letter The second part of it, again, shooting from the hip, is wonder if the public was aware that we really are dealing with, that our numbers are not really valid. And I mean, our numbers, the city's numbers aren't valid because the seeds data is so old. That if there's someone out there that would care, some faculty member, somebody whose world it would be of interest. I'm not suggesting we do that at the outset, but I am suggesting that if writing such a letter doesn't get a response of some sort, we might look at that as being an appropriate action to take. It is troubling to me that we sit here with a title as a commission, that we do audits and come back with dealing with compliance, but we don't really know what the hiring practice should be. Whether how many fire women you should really be hiring, what's the availability? We have no idea. We don't know whether or not the Department of Transportation should be hiring engineers dealing with traffic engineering that are of a particular minority group, because we don't have the numbers. We know that the demographics of the city changed materially over the last 10 years. We know that the Asian population has grown. We know that the Hispanic population has grown, and we know that for want of a better term, the African American population has declined. I don't know whether the white population is altered depending on your borough. I can't answer that, but off the top of my head. But if if DCAS's demographics are 10 years old, it's of a city that doesn't exist anymore.
So in addition, no, I could not agree more with everything that you just said. So one of the things we're doing, so the city, speaking of open data, makes public the civil service lists, right? So those that have taken past the exam is publicly available. Those lists do not include demographic information, unfortunately, but you can assume what somebody is based on their first name. You can tell that whether they're male or female with over 90% accuracy.
Except for Sydney.
Well, no, there's plenty of.
You said 90%.
There's plenty of exceptions, even, I mean, if we were down in Alabama, Tracy and Stacy and all that would also be a little bit confusing, but, so what we are working on right now is a report to update the availability estimates, at least for gender. You can't really make those same assumptions based on race. They don't work as well because there's much more overlapping with that. We are working on that report right now. I don't have any specific findings to share with you, but one example is for example, the city's claim is that the availability estimate for firefighters for females is less than 1%. I think it's 0.8. It's probably now, just in the past 10 years, gone up to about 9 or 10. And that's based entirely on the civil service list. So this is people that are taking the exam. So it's self-selected and have passed. So in addition to the letter that you're talking about, we should have some report, hopefully, in a few months that could be shared. We are also working with DCAS to get the NICAPS data, as we talked about, and civil service data that will include the demographics. And if we do get that, we will be doing our own availability estimates, and that we will have some concrete data to show what the disparities are compared to what they've been using. So those things are in the works.
What's there?
Thank you.
What do the other commissioners think of my proposal of our writing a letter essentially outlining what a reliance on this age seeds data does to every other report that we do, and that it really means that the reports are of little value.
I think it depends on the target of the letter and the audience. I'm a big proponent of opinion pieces. Something like this is going to be in the New York Times or stuff like that. It's just not going to move the needle. You know, if we have the bandwidth to do an op-ed around that. There's also the issue of the seeds data is not the only in town. I mean, the Census Bureau has the EOC tabulation data, that gives you a sense of not availability because these are not individuals who taken the exam, but eligibility to the extent that if an effort was done to recruit these individuals.
Right.
then they can become. Then there's the geographic aspect that people argue around using the census tabulation because it's not New York City 5 boroughs proper, it extends a bit out. But people work in New York City outside of the 5 boroughs.
So,
But the C's data is what based on what we use as availability data.
so each title is a composite based on, and it varies the breakdown, but it's based on, if it's a competitive title who's taken the exam and passed it, then it is based on the census data, and then it's based on some internal pools. If it's like a promotion, there's a tree, it's based on who's at the levels below. So for example, sanitation worker, that's based on the civil service list. Their availability is determined on who's taken and passed it. The police is almost entirely the civil service list, but does have pull a little bit from it. So the availability estimates do include the census, depending on the title, and whether it includes just the city or the surrounding counties will vary because that depends on the title too, who's eligible for what. So it's already built in, but to your point, because it hasn't been updated in 10 years. So for starters, they're basing it on who was taking the exam 10 years ago. That's changed. And then it's also based on who lives here, which has also changed.
But the seeds and the census estimates are not, as our last report have shown, are not the same. The census estimates and the seeds estimates perform very differently in terms of establishing underutilization. So it's not at all the same. And unless you do a Z-score to determine whether, for example, the eligibility list of the availability list, like let's say a sanitation exam, to be used in terms of who's going to be hired, let's say as the percentage or proportion of that to see if there's underutilization, overutilization. That itself is biased because the actual availability may not be reflected of the numbers of people who are eligible for that position based on the census data.
Yes, that's true. But for sanitation, for example, if you're talking about eligible, then we're basically talking about anybody over the age of 18 up until, I don't know what the cutoff is for sanitation exam. For the police, it's 35, right? But so if that's what you're talking about, I'm not aware of any municipal workforce or company that would use that as the estimate, right? This is partly based on self-selection in terms of who takes the exam. And to your point, you're right, okay? So obviously, women are not taking engineering exams at the same rate as men are. There's a lot of social, cultural reasons why. Same thing for firefighting or the police. But even when you use the census data, if a city workforce or a private company uses the census data, they're going to choose those people that have self-identified their occupation as something that's within what the universe is. Now, if we can, if you want to go a step further and say, well, 0.8% availability for firefighters for females is always a ridiculously low number, and there's something off on that. You can find ways to try to weight what the overall population is based on age and all that, and I would certainly be open to doing that.
About the occupational EEPC data.
Yeah, but the city does do that, and that's what they're basing.
Not the population.
Yeah, but the city's already doing that. They are identifying what titles would fit into a manager's group, a
Isn't that
firefighter's
what
group.
C's is?
No, but SEEDS is it's a combination of who takes the exam and who lives in the city. And every title, how they weight it varies.
And that data, which is what we use.
Is the 10-year-old data.
10-year-old data.
Both.
But
That's one of the factors that I said initially, which is wasn't to write the opinion piece, the initial piece was to try to have the seeds data updated, and since we have recommended it, to highlight that. And highlight that by telling those people within the city council who might care, and those people within the mayor's office who might care, that this is something that needs to happen for our reports to have any value.
So
it will be done again, but that's the recommendations that.
That's my
we put forth.
recommendation.
That's the recommendations that we put forth
right.
in the report in the executive summary. Let's move to the point of the census for the sanitation as an example. the census estimates have proven more accurate than the seeds one, because even for sanitation, it includes all individuals working, let's say, for private haulers, who have the ability, capability, the physical attributes, and all these different things that are taken into account to be eligible for that public sector civil service job. You know, ideally, if all things being equal in society, would have allowed for them to either have the awareness of it, the social capital to know whether the exam is going to be given, and whatever. So that the census data more accurately captures the actual pool from which that occupation can be recruited. So that's what I'm saying, that there's certain, and municipalities who don't have, there's municipalities that solely use the EEOC occupation census to establish availability.
Right.
You know, the argument there is that availability should be, for equity reasons, expanded beyond just for taking an exam, to understand the fullness of what's underutilization. So that's
Do
just.
do we understand why it takes so long to get the data?
I think,
The seeds one is DCAS, right, that does that, right? And I think
Right.
their argument was that, I mean, not an argument, but their idea is that they need to hire consultants, right, to do all of this work. And
Or hire someone who
Experts.
comes down to do it. And the issue is that they don't have the finance, the money to do it. I mean, that's what I've heard historically. I assume nothing's changed, that continues to be the lament. And so they do it every 10 years, so theoretically, it mirrors the census. That being said, are they undertaking to redo it now? And to the best of our knowledge, there's nothing that indicates that they're doing it now. That's troubling, because that means that maybe it's not gonna be 10 years old, but it's gonna be 12 years old.
So would you say the adoption of the census occupational tabulation from the EEOC is one that we shouldn't adopt?
no, I am not saying we shouldn't. I would say if you had a world where the civil service system, the competitive civil service system was truly
Open and
advertised well and open and available, then I would be more comfortable just using it. But again, the city doesn't use it, it does use both. Now, getting into a discussion about how much to weight it or whether we should move to only doing what the census does, that's a different discussion. I think even if all we do is update it just based on what the city's current rules are, we're already going to show that there's a lot that's changed. And that by itself, I think, is a useful discussion. So for example, if you want to go and contact the city council and say to them, it's been 10 years since they've been updated. We've been pointing this out for 2 or 3 years now and nothing's happened. If we have a report that indicates, for example, the firefighters claim they're not underutilizing females right now in the firefighter title. That's not true.
Not the firefighters saying that, we claim we have no report.
Right, well, no, but they're saying that they don't, that there's no underutilization, but that's what C says,
Yeah,
right?
well,
There's
that's
no.
what we said in our report too.
Right, but we have to because that's their data. But if we have then updated the availability estimate ourselves, which is one of the projects that we're working on, and we can say you're short 800 firefighters and that are females. I think that if we have a concrete example like that with your letter, that makes it stronger. And we should have something like that, not in a year's time, in months' time, that,
Okay.
you know,
So my letter should wait.
yes.
Should wait until we have an example in it. I couldn't agree more, but I really do think we have to do something to move the needle, or it will be, we're all operating under budget cuts. We're gonna continue to operate under budget cuts. According to the New York State Comptroller, the city is gonna be billions of dollars in the red. So this is gonna continue going forward. And that being said, we're gonna have this problem going forward. So we've got to figure out some way to motivate someone to change where the monies are going and to fund this particular project. Because otherwise, the reports we're doing are of little, no value. I mean, it's troubling to me. And I sound like a broken record, so I'm gonna shut up.
And I just want to respond to one of your last points. So I think in a longer, more extensive report, comparing what, if we only relied on the census compared to doing this hybrid, you know, civil service list and all that, can definitely, that's something that we will do. And then depending on what the numbers say, then it's a question of how we frame it. And because, you know, we don't want everything to drown in a 100-page report, right? So I think starting off with just saying that even within the city's own rules, everything's outdated, I think is probably a good first step. And then maybe going to what you're talking about where, well, is the civil service exam system open enough that we can really rely on that? I think it's a great question. Then it is the next step after that.
No further discussion. Next we go to pilot program of the state agency for running under utilization.
Am I taking that or?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we are beginning interviews with administrators and executives at the city agency starting next week. We've already identified about a dozen HR, EEO, administrative personnel that we'll be sitting down with and talking to for about an hour each. And we hope to, how quickly we complete that will only depend on their availability. So hopefully within a couple of weeks, we would do this first round of interviews, the purpose of which is to get a big picture overview of the agency. What is their overall agency goals and strategies, broadly speaking, but then also obviously specifically in terms of EEO and underutilization. And once we collect that data from those initial interviews, we will then move into trying to work on a survey and then more conversations and focus groups with mid-level managers and line staff. So we're proceeding. We have our first interview scheduled on Monday, and we'll be scheduling the others in the coming few weeks.
Thank you. So we're into the last portion of the meeting, adjournment. Before we go into adjournment, I'd like to echo and speak out for the commission in terms of Jennifer Shaw, in terms of the incredible service of the city of New York. Leave it to a place like New York City with like 8.5 million residents. 320 some thousand odd civil employees, civil servants, public employees, the largest, most diverse city in the country, right? To have the EEPC or EEOC type framework apparatus to ensure, monitor, and audit compliance on equity, inclusion, and diversity in the city, and the head of the legal and the compliance wears two hats. You offer your service to the EEPC in the city, often working under excruciating, difficult circumstances, conflicting and competing interests and priorities, often thrusted upon you by a variety of different commissioners over time, which may not make sense, and different executive directors that have come down during the tenure, and yet you have to keep the morale, productivity going the unit on the movements, great change, recently of which is the pandemic, other challenges beyond that as well. So, you know, been just a commensurate, skills, your talent, your passion to the issue, to cause it to the city and to ensure this. The workers, met with some community boards and other places that show frustration, that no one really cares or sees, does anything about some of the sexual harassment, discrimination, racial, ethnic, or religious, or even otherwise that employees face. And time and time again, you try to do the best you can through the agency and the audits, through that kind of organizational cultural change that is required to ensure that workplaces are safe, diverse, respectful, compliant. So I just want to thank you for that. And lastly, you went up against struggles that, you often had to go to meetings where there's 4 or 5 or 6 lawyers that you come with your legal pad and you have to go up against a great many minds to fight for the jurisdictional authority of the EEPC against other entities that question whether we have authority to audit them or not. And I've seen you do that. It's pretty amazing in terms of everything you brought to bear to make sure that tiny engine that could against big institutions, 40,000 employees, 17 attorneys, and all that. So, go in there and fight the good fight, often win. You know, make the city of New York a good place for them. Does not go without knowing something to within our commission. And executive staff and stuff. Doing so much great opportunities, you know, scope of work and the substance and magnitude of work that you did. It's very city as big as New York City. Anywhere you're gonna go now, you're gonna be like a hero. And you're gonna be like, what can I do with the extra 5 hours? I have a day? Only been for 3 hours. But good for you. You deserve the quality of life. You deserve the additional conversation. You deserve the additional prestige and deserve kind of career growth and trajectory. Like, so hard to achieve. Thank you for deciding to dedicate some of your life to public service to the city of New York.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Just to Jennifer, while we're on the record, I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate everything you've done, that you've always been here, that you've always been so super helpful, and the person that I relied greatly on during my entire 2 years here. So, you know, I have to, you know, reiterate everything that the chair said, and also just say, you know, thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you. I really appreciate your recognition. We are the little engine that could, and I've been proud to be a part of that change and a part of this commission. I feel like the work that we do is really important for the city of New York, and I'm glad that I was able to have the minimum impact that I could have. And I hope it was a little bit more than minimum, but anything that I could do to help, I'm really, I feel very proud of my accomplishments and my time here, and I enjoy working with you all. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Knowing,
I move to adjourn.
yes, we have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? I have a second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, I see Commissioner Alcantara smiling. Smiling, so, meeting is adjourned, and we, I believe, have a couple of executive session items to attend to. So we wait for the recording to conclude, before we begin. But
Alcantara, just jump on the executive session link.
There's another, okay, hold on, let me find it. Okay. So do I need to close this one first?
Yes, and then you can click on that one and it'll, we'll
Okay.
see you in the same here.